All right. Good evening, everybody, or good morning if you are on the East Coast.
It is
This is your
still the
Facebook
evening on the East
meteorologist.
Coast.
Oh, okay. Yes. Good evening for everybody. This is your Facebook meteorologist, Sean Bagden here from Mississippi State, followed along with your Facebook meteorologist, Derek Centrone here out of Embry-Riddle. And we are live today to talk about a couple of things that have been going on within the meteorology community, especially online as of recent, with a lot of controversy there, and also talking about potential development within the Caribbean over the next 4 to 5 days or so. We're going to break all that down, and of course, leave comments below if you have any questions regarding anything. And as it says in the description there, we won't be answering any questions regarding US or Florida impacts today, as we are uncertain of where this system is expected to go after the Caribbean. So we're going to keep things very general in this live stream, but I'm going to hand it over to Derek Centrone, as he does have a couple of things to say before we get started with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I just want to say, as somebody who has background in Florida, I am a native Floridian. I'm currently going to school in Daytona Beach here. I really go back with Florida, and I just want people to know, especially other native Floridians right now, that this is not something I wish upon Florida. I do not wish major hurricanes. I don't wish hurricanes. I don't wish tropical storms. I don't wish any kind of destruction on Florida. So any impacts, any kind of storm that I do forecast for Florida comes completely from science, comes completely from forecasting, comes completely from meteorology, comes completely from any sort of model interpretation that I do. It comes from knowledge I have. It comes from any kind of science background that I can possibly have here. I don't manifest this. I don't want this. I don't want to see any kind of destruction. I don't want to see my family die in this. Like, this just comes purely from any kind of forecasting I do. Um, and this just goes out to all of the haters and the people who doubt me out there. Um, this has personal impacts on me. So if I leave a comment on anybody's comments, any kind of replies, any kind of posts on the hurricane impacts on Florida, this isn't just me trying to get hype, clicks, views, money, anything. This just comes from me trying to make sure that people who are in the path of any kind of storm we do get understand the implications, understand the impacts that the storm has. I've had people in my personal life who have had impacts from these storms. This just purely comes from me being concerned about other people.
Yeah,
And I hope that people
absolutely.
understand that.
And yeah, exactly. And I also have quite a bit of family down in the Florida area too, even in the Tampa area that have been affected by the previous hurricanes, and as well as up in the Daytona and Palm Coast areas. But that's where we're kind of coming from with this forecast. We're just trying to give you the most accurate information possible that we can give you guys. But moving on forward, and I think this is a good segue here. There's been a lot of different talk within the meteorology community as of recent regarding potential development of really any named storm here. We've been hearing talks about Nadine. We've been hearing talks about the Gulf, all of this. And there's a lot of people saying, there's two camps. It's either it is happening or it's not going to happen. There's really no in between. And that's kind of what we're trying to do for you guys right here. We're trying to tell you there is expected development. We're not sure where it's going past the time it's in the Caribbean. But we're not telling you it's not happening. We're not putting down your guard so much that if something does happen, you're caught off guard and you're not able to be informed about the storm. But we're also not telling you a major category 4 hurricane is going into Florida or anything like that. We're not trying to fearmonger here or anything. And we're just trying to keep it realistic, as Derek was saying earlier. Anything you want to say about the controversy here, Derek, before we move on into the actual potential development?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I do think that there is a danger in allowing this fear mongering to continue. There are people who are claiming they know the exact path of this hurricane. There are people who are claiming they know the exact intensity of this hurricane. And that is absolutely bogus as of right now. There is no proof to any path or intensity of any kind of storm that could form in the Gulf. And anybody who claims they know anything beyond a potential disturbance in the Caribbean or Gulf has no qualifications to be talking. I do understand that some people are trying to forecast right now or claim they have a knowledge in meteorology that might be a kid or might be somebody who's just starting out. And I understand what that's like. I've been there before. I've been somebody who's been trying to understand meteorology before. But as of right now, th- um, this isn't a place for that. This is trust, this is confidence, and this is belief in your local meteorologists and pages like us that do have those qualifications to be able to make these calls. And if you do have those qualifications, I do expect you to be speaking out with your honest opinions right now, because that's what's going to be keeping people safe.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Don't be if you do have the qualifications to say something, don't let the wave take you, if that is a good analogy. Don't let people sway you either way. If you know what you're talking about, you know what you're talking about. And if you are a meteorologist, please go ahead and say what you believe about the storm. That is because you are completely qualified, just like us here, to make a educated judgment on this potential development here. But at this time, if you are a meteorologist, you don't know where this is going past the Caribbean. And if somebody tells you otherwise, they're likely not a meteorologist, if unless they're giving you like a really broad cone and saying that they're uncertain, kind of like we are right here.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are people who are saying that this is not going to happen, and that's just as reckless as saying that this has a certain path right now, because there are people anywhere from Nicaragua to Cancun to other places along the Gulf um, not affiliated with the United States at all that could be impacted by anywhere from flooding rains to a tropical system right now. That should keep in mind that the Central American gyre is still very much a real possibility as we go through the rest of hurricane season. And by saying that nothing at all is going to happen is very ignorant right now. Yes,
Yeah,
there is a
absolutely.
possibility.
And this,
Yes, there's a
okay,
wait.
go
Hey,
ahead.
can I just finish this?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a chance that there's not going to be another hurricane or tropical storm here that impacts the United States, but just acknowledging the impacts that these systems have on other countries or even on the United States right now, there is a chance for this to impact the United States at some point, even if it's not a major hurricane. It's just important to keep in mind because hurricane season is still here for about another month and a half. And through that hurricane season is the official published time that we could have impacts from hurricanes or tropical weather throughout the United States. So, whether or not this is going to be an impact on the United States or not, it's important to keep on guard through that entire hurricane season because that is an official published um, guide from the National Hurricane Center and from NOAA of a time period where these hurricanes can impact us.
Absolutely. And again, we completely get that there's people, especially along the Gulf Coast of Florida, that have been devastated over the past couple of weeks there. Their homes have been taken away, and all of that. So we do feel for those people, especially having family in those areas. And we that is why we're trying to keep this um, down unless we do get information that says that we need to start talking about potential U.S. impacts, which at this time we really don't have any knowledge past the Caribbean, like we've been saying here. So again, we're just gonna try to keep it real here through the duration of the storm, and that's about the best we can do. All right. And if that is all you have to say about the controversy that we've been having recently through the meteorology community, how about we get on to the actual area of potential development and start talking about some broad conditions we're looking at when talking in regards to potential development in the Caribbean. Do you want me
Yeah,
to pull up
absolutely.
some teleconnections or go on over to CHI?
Probably teleconnections first, then CHI, and then over to MJO and other conditions like that, because there's a lot coming together right now that are pulling this together to be a hotspot in both the Caribbean and the Gulf.
Absolutely. I've got your teleconnections up right here. Let's start off with the PNA, which I can actually go over here real quick for you,
Go
and then
for
you
it.
can go through the MJO. We'll go like that.
Of
But
course.
as of right now, it does appear the Pacific North American pattern here, the PNA, is significantly in the positive right now. What that means is you start getting a weakening of the subtropical jet, and a lot of these areas of higher winds aloft start to decrease and potentially move a little bit more north out of the Gulf, allowing for a slightly more favorable wind pattern or less wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico here. And that's exactly what we're seeing here through about, I would say, October 15th or 16th there, through the next few days, which is right around that time that we are looking at the models and seeing potential development across the Caribbean. So that's one reason we're watching here. And then potentially once it has started to develop, that is when conditions may become slightly more hostile as it goes neutral. But as we've seen, we'll talk about it through the CHI here in a minute. But with Milton, we had a very similar pattern as well. Things were looking very hostile, and then we ended up getting a slight uptick in the PNA, and then we were able to get that development in the Bay of Campeche. Same things happening here, but again, things do get a little bit more hostile as we go in through late October here. So it's time will tell if we are going to be seeing a strengthening hurricane or more of like a steady state kind of tropical wave, tropical storm sort of system heading into the Northern Caribbean here. Time will only tell. Is there anything you want to add on to the PNA?
Yeah, just something I want to add on here is similar to what we saw with Milton, is the difference between a positive and a negative can really mean the difference between development or not. As this is positive, we could see a slight uptick in development, but as it goes slightly negative, what we can see is some of those troughs diving down into the southern United States and even the Gulf. And this is where we have our question mark on landfall location right now, because if we can get this jet phasing and these troughs diving down into the southern United States and even the Gulf, this is where we could question where this land impact could be. Because if that really does happen, that could start to narrow down where landfall can be. Do you have anything to add to that, Sean?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to add on a little bit to what you were saying about uncertainty. Once the PNA starts to go neutral or negative, you can get those deep digging troughs, and a lot of times those can inhibit development. But just like we've seen with past hurricanes, it can also increase development as well, which is where kind of the hard part of the forecast comes. You don't really know what region of the jet this storm is going to interact with, even if it does become a storm. We don't know what section of the trough it's going to interact with. Is it going to interact with the section where there's divergence aloft and it can rapidly intensify? Or is it going to get absorbed by the trough and get completely ripped apart by wind shear? Both are possibilities at this point, and we have to observe model trends here as the storm comes closer to development And once it has developed, we'll have a better idea of what we're going to be looking at if the storm is able to enter into the Gulf of Mexico, and into what environment is it entering into. Is it a favorable environment? Is it a hostile environment? And that is yet to be seen at this time, especially with a very tricky regime to forecast in. Is there anything else you want to add on to that, or do you want to head on over to the MJO? Okay, I guess we'll head on over to the MJO here, and I'll let Derek take it away on the MJO. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm absolutely ready to talk about this. Sorry about that. There was a couple seconds here. I had to step off.
Okay, yeah, no, you are all good. I got the MJO pulled up right here for you, and go ahead.
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know what the MJO is, that is it's a factor to our hurricane or tropical system development that is coming off the Indian continent, and it is, or Asian Indian continent, which is a elevated heat source, which is causing ridges, um, which as they interact with the Gulf and the Atlantic could possibly kind of push that cap off some of the subsidence that we're having and allow some of these tropical systems to development. Last time I looked at it, it looks like through the time of development of the system that we could be looking at about a positive MJO um, in the Atlantic of about 2 standard deviations from what we are normally looking at, which could allow for this to just kind of gently pop the cap off that subsidence. This isn't going to be some kind of explosive interaction the way some other interactions we've had in the past are, but this could be just enough to influence this to allow for this tropical system development while we're eyeing this Central American gyre system and these low shear anomalies as well. Do you have anything to add on to that, Sean?
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue into what we're looking at on the CHI here. Talking about the gyre. Actually, it's loading a new run here, but we'll head on over back to the 12Z if it allows us. There we go. And we can clearly see here where the Central American gyre has developed. It's right here across the Honduras, Nicaragua area, right over that tip where you get those cyclonically curved wind flows around the land surface there. You kind of get the northerlies along Honduras, and then as they curve along the coast of Nicaragua there, you start to get the east to west flow, which kind of starts spin to occur in that area. And that is a very common area this time of year to see tropical development. And as you can see, through the next week at least, we do have favorable conditions, semi-favorable area for developing tropical systems here, where the lid is slightly off of the atmosphere there, allowing for potential tropical growth in that area. And as you go forward through time here, this is the next week, you can kind of see an erosion here of the CHI in the eastern Gulf of Mexico here, as well as the northern Caribbean. And looking like the Gulf is shut down over in the western Caribbean. So, or in the western Gulf there in the Bay of Campeche. So if this system, as some models are showing, would tend to go over the Yucatan and cross into the Bay of Campeche, we would likely see just impacts to Belize and the Yucatan, and then a rapid weakening over the Yucatan, and likely not seeing any more development as it moved into the Bay of Campeche. It would slowly peter out as there is significant suppression over there. But if it were to ride along the boundary where it's starting to fade that suppression, you could be looking at a steady state storm at this time. Of course, you can get a quicker erosion of that, or it may stay stronger. That suppression that is over the Texas, central U.S., southern plains area there, which will again have a big factor on whether this can intensify or if it's just going to end up choking itself off of its air supply up there in the Gulf or between the gap here of Cancun and Havana in Cuba. Is there anything else you want to add on to that, Derek?
Yeah, absolutely. While this is a pattern that's being shown in the GEFS, it's very important to look at the patterns that are being shown in the normal GFS as well. Um, the GFS model, which is a little bit more of a model that has been familiar to people, I've seen very specific comments that have shown that the GFS model is a model that people see more often than the GEFS. I just want to emphasize both models are very real models. Both models are being used appropriately. Ensemble models really just show a general condition of what we're looking at versus operational models such as the GFS are being used to look at a little bit more specific conditions at a certain point in time. And that's to everybody who doesn't really know the difference between those two models, that the GEFS is just as real as the GFS. Um, Certain GFS runs have been showing a slight negative in the CHI over areas of the Gulf and the Caribbean. So that's important to keep in mind with these storms, that if that is able to develop and we do get a little bit more green in that CHI, that these storms are really going to pop. That's really going to pop the cap off that subsidence. And that's not being shown in this ensemble model right now. So if that is able to form and these storms are able to form in the sense that these GFS models are showing, that this is something to really keep in mind, because I really do expect the subsidence to be weaker than these ensemble models are showing. Um, but this
Especially
looks,
due to that positive PNA, right?
yeah, that positive PNA and that stage 5 MJO, both of those are really showing that this is going to allow these storms to form. And even if they run into conditions that are a little bit more hostile later on, formation's the first thing we're looking at, and the after formation impacts are the second thing we're looking at here.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we're talking about formation impacts, let's actually head on over to the ensemble models right now and have a look at what models are hinting at. This is what prompted us to make our post earlier today. As we've been seeing this same trend we're about to show you for about the past 4 or 5 days, which is showing pretty good consistency. We just wanted to wait until it had been consistent for a long time in order to kind of sound the alarm that this was going to be forming out in the Caribbean here, just because we didn't want to be those people that are talking about the system developing 12, 14, 18 days out, like we've been hearing from. But as we step through in time here, we're going to head into, where are we looking at here? This is Monday night into Tuesday morning here of next week. We start seeing ensemble members popping off a potential area of low pressure developing here along the southern end of the Central American gyre. We do have a pretty good cluster here of strong agreement between members that it's going to be developing right along the Honduras coastline here, and potentially developing into a tropical storm as early as late Wednesday. So what is that, about 5 days out from now? And we do have pretty strong agreement among models where it's going to be developing and when it's going to be becoming a tropical storm. And this has been shown, the strong consistency here on location and intensity for the past several model runs here. We're looking at 3, 4, 5. Okay, about 5 model runs, but again, it was showing potential development here even earlier on than that, as it's been in agreement of potential positioning of the system. What's going on there? There we go. And I will let Derek take it away on potential steering patterns that we're looking at as we look at the ensembles moving forward. We're going to cut it off once we hit the gap there between the Yucatan and Cuba, just because that is where we start seeing divergence in solutions.
Okay, so I'm just gonna let people know if I cut off abruptly, my phone is really low on percentage here. I will come back on as soon as I possibly can, but what I'm looking at right now for steering patterns is a very common pattern for the United States right now. Later in the season here, we are coming up on the end of hurricane season, which means only one thing: very, very drawn out troughs and very frequent troughs that are racing across the continental United States right now. And all of those are going to impact Florida. So I don't want people to be tricked when it comes to frontal boundaries or troughs coming across the United States and being impacted by these storms. A general consensus is that these storms will be impacted by troughs as they move across the United States. I've seen memes on TikTok. I've seen other just kind of videos being posted of these storms hitting Houston and pushing frontal boundaries back to the west, with these frontal boundaries retrograding. That's not a pattern that we frequently see here. So I just want people to think before they react to a meme or something that they're seeing with frontal boundaries retrograding and stuff. We have absolutely no idea where the storm is going to go right now. Um, Looking at
Absolutely. I
this,
mean, the most common spot that pretty much the only spot you're going to see retrograding frontal boundaries is up in New England, and this storm will not be anywhere near New England. So, likely not seeing a retrograding pattern, more of a progressive pattern this time of year. But go ahead, continue. Okay, I guess Derek's cell phone died right there. But while I will continue along for him while we're waiting for him to get battery back here, we are again expecting development of this system right along the southern end of the American Gyre, the Central American Gyre rather, as we head into Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday, as we do have strong agreement with the development of a tropical system here. And the overall consensus of models is that this system is going to be moving off to the north and the west after development, likely going to be just passing to the northeast of the Central American Peninsula there before moving into the northern Caribbean as we move through time. This is where we start talking about impacts to potentially Cancun, Havana, the vacation areas. I know we have about 1,000 people, followers, or people that do watch our videos but are not following, that are either from Cancun or they're vacationing in Cancun this week. So this will be very important for those people to be keeping an eye on, as this is likely the most favorable area for potential intensification of the system, as up here in the Gulf, it is still, as we've been saying, very unknown how the storm is going to interact with either trough axes or suppression. We really have to wait for the center to develop before we can actually start talking about specifics north of the Caribbean. But we can start talking about Cancun, those vacation areas right now. And it does look like this system will have impacts to those areas as it moves through, no matter how strong it is. A lot of models here do have a 965 consensus there. That would be around a Category 2 hurricane. We are unsure of intensity since it hasn't developed yet, though. But the conditions are favorable for development in this area. So definitely something to keep an eye on, especially if you are vacationing in the Cancun area. And then as you continue to move through time, this is the weekend, next weekend, October 19th on Saturday, you do start to see that divergence, which is normal among model solutions as you go further out in time. And again, we do have that certainty of track and development of the system all the way up to Cancun and Havana. But after that, the amount of troughs digging south through the United States and into the Gulf of Mexico is going to have an impact on the storm. We just don't know if it's a favorable impact for intensification or a hostile impact on intensification, or if it'll even just completely squash the system. There is a complete divergence once we end up moving through the Saturday time frame. A couple models end up taking it over Cuba, a couple take it into the Yucatan and crush it over the Bay of Campeche, and a couple take it into the Gulf. We have a pretty well spread guidance here, which is why, again, in our post earlier, we said we are a little bit uneasy talking about U.S. impacts right now because we still do have that huge spread in model guidance, but it is expected that we will have a storm developing and it will make its way up to the gap. It's just uncertain what is going to happen as it passes through the gap. We are going to have increasingly favorable conditions in the Gulf, but is the suppression going to be enough to weaken the system? Is it going to interact with a trough in an unfavorable area? That is something that we have yet to see in the model solutions. We'll likely have a really good idea or a better idea of what's going to be occurring after the gap once we get into Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, which again, we'll likely do a post and go live. Once this storm is an invest, we start getting hurricane hunters flying in there. And once the hurricane hunters start flying in, we're going to start getting model data or data into the models from the hurricane hunters that will give us a better idea of what's going to happen after the Caribbean, once it moves north of the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico, because then we're going to have a better idea. They'll probably do an upper air analysis before they actually start flying planes into the storm. That's a pattern where they kind of fly in a square around where the storm's expected to travel and then go around the outer edge of the wind field of the storm right up around 30,000 feet or so, just in order to get a better idea of the surrounding environment of the storm. And when they make those passes, a lot of times models get completely or significantly less confused as we're able to get that upper air data in there. It's like dropping several weather balloons, and it really helps us meteorologists out in a big way when it comes to this model consensus data. But again, we are anticipating or expecting development here as we have strong guidance consistency showing development just off the Honduras-Nicaragua coastline here as a tropical storm sometime in the late Tuesday to Wednesday time frame here, and then moving into the Yucatan, Cancun, Havana area by the early weekend time frame. And then we'll have to start talking about the Gulf probably when we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, as right now, again, we are completely unsure of what happens past the gap and Havana and Cuba at this time. Let me see. Derek is still not here, so I'm guessing he's still charging his phone. So at this time, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section. If you do not, we'll probably be heading out here pretty quick, as this was just meant to be a broad overview of the conditions and whether or not they are favorable for development, which, as we've analyzed, they are definitely favorable for development and increasingly favorable through time, especially as we're looking at the PNA there. We may get positive trough interactions. We might get negative trough interactions. That's why we are not making a call on any Gulf Coast impacts at this time. We will be doing forecasts and forecast discussions on this event for the Cancun and Havana, as well as Tulum vacation communities there, because I do know we have a lot of viewers that are in Cancun, Tulum, Playa del Carmen, Havana. There are a lot of people that watch us that are there. So we're definitely going to be keeping them informed through the storm as it moves its way through the Caribbean. And then we'll get to you guys further north if we need to later on. That is about all we have today. And we will see you guys in the next live. We'll be making some more posts once we have a better idea on the potential development of this Caribbean system. Have a great day, everybody, and we will see you soon.